वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव पंच बिहारी जय राधा माधव पंच बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रञ्जन यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रञ्जन यमुनतीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि जय राधमाधव कुञ्ज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परमहंस सदा श्रीमती स्वयं विशेष भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक जय शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परमहंस सदा श्रीमती स्वयं विशेष भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद शकुर केशवदास महाराज की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद शिल भक्ति ठाकुर की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद वैष्णव शार्वल श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमचर्य श्री ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत दाता श्री गौरव भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री राधा कृष्ण को श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड के गोवर्धन की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगमाई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथा श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन भक्त रघुवंद की जय। समाज भक्त गौरव प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to Shikuru and Shikauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire नष्टप्रायेषु पुत्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25, text number 17 and 18. I'll read the text 17 first. Pujastu bahyoppavane divyatruma ratakule Nadat Vihangali Kula Kolaha Kolahala Jalashaye. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. Purport Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Since the body is a great city, there must be various arrangements such as lakes and gardens for sense enjoyment. Of the various parts of the body, those which incite sexual impulses are referred to here indirectly. Because the body has genitals, when the living entity attains the right age, be he man or a woman, he becomes agitated by sex impulse. As long as one remains a child, he is not agitated by seeing a beautiful woman. Although the sense organs are present, unless the age is ripe, there is no sex impulse. The favorable conditions surrounding the sex impulse are compared here to a garden or a nice solitary park. When one sees the opposite sex, naturally the sex impulse increases. It is said that if a man is in a solitary place, does not become agitated upon seeing a woman, he is to be considered a brahmachari. But this practice is almost impossible. The sex impulse is so strong that even by seeing, touching, or talking, coming into contact with, or even thinking of the opposite sex, even in so many subtle ways, one becomes sexually impelled. Consequently, a brahmachari or sannyasi is prohibited to associate with women, especially in a secret place. The Shastras enjoin that one should not even talk to a woman in a secret place, even if she happens to be one's own daughter, sister, or mother. The sex impulse is so strong that even if one is very learned, he becomes agitated in such circumstances. If this is the case, how can a young woman in a nice park remain calm and quiet after seeing a beautiful young woman? Text number 18. Himad nirt hara viprushmat kusumakara vayuna chala pravala vitapa nalini tata sampadi. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The branches of the tree standing on the bank of the lake received particles of water carried by the spring air from the falls coming down from the icy mountain. In this verse, the word Hima Nirjara is particularly significant. The waterfall represents a kind of liquid humor or rasa relationship. In the body, there are different types of humor, rasa, or mellow. The supreme mellow relationship is called sexual mellow or adi rasa. When this adi rasa or sex desire comes in contact with the spring air moved by Cupid, it becomes agitated. In other words, all these are representations of rupa, rasa, gandha, shabda, and sparsha. The wind is sparsha or touch. The waterfall is rasa or taste. The spring air, kusumakara, is smell. All these varieties of enjoyment make life very pleasing, and thus we become captivated by material existence. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurvanitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadabhim Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Vidavada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakarjatam Sagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Srivam Satvaitam Sabhadutam Parjan Sahitam Shri Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुस्ते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यश्च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मोहम करोति वाचालं पंगम लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दिनतारिणं परमात्मानं श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरम्। Hare Krishna. So we see in this chapter of characteristics of King Puranjana, Narad Muni is narrating the life of King Prachina Parhisat to Prachina Parhitas itself, comparing his life to a king called Puranjana. Prachina Parhisat was a high level of materialist, and uh, he is killing a lot of animals, and he's indulging in a lot of sinful activities. So, in the process of his travel, he comes across Narad Muni, who is explaining to him that karma kanda activities is not enough to achieve perfection of life. That means in the Vedas, we have discussed before the karma kanda, jnana kanda, upasana kanda. Karma kanda basically emphasizes on sacrifices of animals and many other these things, which basically says if you do this, you get this. If you do this, you get this. You achieve heavenly planets and so forth. Jnana kanda is basically more of a speculative nature. And finally, Upasana Kanda, there is a little bit of devotional service that starts with. So it is necessary. Now, Pachina Barhit was a great king. Well, like I mentioned in the last week's class, one cannot become a king unless and until he has performed a lot of pious activities in his previous births. So it is a practice. It was a practice before also that any movement would involve leaders, political leaders, sports personalities, and so forth, who have a lot of influence over the common man. Because when leaders speak, it has an effect on common man. For example, we see day-to-day basis so many advertisements coming in TV and newspaper displaying cricketers or some politician or some musician, something like that. The reason is that people get carried away by such uh, impressions, even if the concerned person who is promoting the product may not be using the product. This is a fact of life, which we all know. So it is important for even during Srila Prabhupada's time, he wanted to involve leaders in sports and political leaders and etc. because they have influence over common man. So during his time, we see that many people, leaders, for example, George Harrison from those days was very famous. Beatles, one of the most popular singers in the Beatles group, which was very popular during those days. George Harrison came in, and then some tennis players also still brought in. The point is that when they exhibit something in the interest of a particular moment, it has an impact over the common man. In fact, George Harrison himself compiled a song after coming to ISKCON in the name of My Sweet Lord, which was very popular those days, and even now it is very popular. Well, he compiled this song after hearing from Srila Prabhupada about Krishna consciousness. So it was necessary even during those days to utilize great personalities. So Narad Muni is utilizing King Prachina Barhisar by narrating the story of a materialistic person or king in the name of Puranjana. So basically, he's talking about King Prachina Barhisar, but giving a different name. This is how it is. So, Narad Muni also preached to Megari. So, likewise, Srila Prabhupada, when he went to the West, he preached to people who are very, very low by mentality and very living a very dirty life. Not only that, Srila Prabhupada always wanted everyone to preach also, but he converted these hippies to happies. So, Srila Prabhupada, here there's a mention about karma kanda activity. So, Narad Muni is explaining to King Prachinavarhisar that about this karma kanda activities are not sufficient enough. So, there is a quote by Srila Prabhupada from the verses given by Sri Narottam Das Thakura, which says Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Kevala Vishera Panda. I'm not going to the sloka now. So the translation says fruitive activities and mental speculation are simply cups of poison. And whoever drinks them, thinking of them to be nectar, must struggle very hard life after life in different types of bodies. And such a person eats all kinds of nonsense and becomes condemned by his activities of the so-called sense enjoyment. I'll take a minute or two to explain on this point. We see today also many Brahmanas conduct karma kanda sacrifices. And of course, Brahmanas may not sacrifice animals these days, because sacrifice of animals is prohibited. But still, if you go to the deeper interiors, there are people who sacrifice animals, and these are all called fruitive activities, and they result in fact into negative reactions. People who perform these types of sacrifices also suffer. People who are performing, who are hosting these types of sacrifices also suffer, and they don't get any benefit out of it. So it is said that they suffer life after life in different types of bodies. Now, in these two verses that we are discussing today, the emphasis is what is called sense enjoyment. I'm very sorry to be very blunt in whatever expressions I may have to do it, but I'm putting it frankly, without any ill feelings, because I'm basically quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam, my scripture. So basically, material existence is made in such a way to fulfill the desire of sex pleasure of all the living entities. Like Srila Prabhupada always quotes that material world, the biggest, highest pleasure is sex pleasure, which is what today's using. It is said that even for success in material life, one must have control over sex impulse. Overindulgence in sex leads to damaging results in one's own body, discharge of semen, etc. We will discuss this at a little later. Apart from many unexpected, unwanted diseases like AIDS and so many diseases are coming up day by day. This is due to unlimited and unwanted sex indulgence. Now, there is a difference between human life and animal life. We all have some sort of a background, and animals have a certain type of background. Now, animals uh, are basically focused on eating, mating, defending, and sleeping. And if humans are on the same category, then there is no difference between the animal and human life. Srila Prabhupada always gives this example. Even in the case of animals, it is said that they are much more regulated compared to humans. The reason is that animals cannot have sex throughout the year. So that is saying that they have seasons for them to mate, which is also a fact. And in the case of human beings, they can have sex 365 days a year, all the 24 hours a day. So some time back, I read an article which said that we brought some cheetah from South Africa. So because it breeds well in that country. There is a special environment that is required for any species of life to perform sex life. So like that, it is there for other species of life also. Like, for example, the species cheetah, if it is bred in South Africa, the environment there may be very hot and conducive for cheetah to breed. So like that, there are environment for all species of life to conduct sex life. But it is said that for those who are progressing in spiritual activities, I already mentioned about material activities. For those who are indulging in spiritual activities, it is much more important for them to abstain from unregulated sex indulgence, which we will discuss some of the reasons there during the class. If we don't maintain this, then we are degraded to animalistic propensities. But unfortunately, the modern education and the modern system is to promote sex activities. Whether you see a TV or buy a book or a magazine, they all promote sex life. Unfortunately, those who promote, they don't know that they are degrading themselves and degrading the others to animal form of life. Uh, some states, if you all know, sometime few years back, when our country was running short scarcity of food, there was a promotion to regulate family progeny, regulate population, because they thought that the way the country expands, if there is too much of population, we may not have, during this was during Srila Prabhupada's time, we may not have food to sustain the population. But Srila Prabhupada always said that food is provided by nature, and nature gives food when we perform Sankirtana. And he gave a lot of examples, like elephants eat about 40 kgs of food every day. And Africa is a poor country. And if elephants can get their food, or each elephant gets 40 kgs of food, why not human being? He gave examples. Again, now if we see current days, I saw some other states, they want people to increase population because they say if we don't increase, then the Hindu population will decrease. They're giving so many reasons. And we don't want to dwell on that subject. That's not the point. Is that whatever politicians or so forth propagate, it need not be true from the Vedic perspective. Now, Shastras don't forbid sex, but it must be regulated. Srila Prabhupada also said that you can have as many children as you want. There is no problem. But you must have sex life for the purpose of procreation, not for creation, not for recreation. Recreation is entertainment, whereas procreation is creating a progeny that understands what is the purpose of human life. In fact, Srimad Bhagavatam clearly says that one should not become a father, mother, king, or a spiritual master or a teacher unless and until he can deliver his dependents from the cycle of birth and death. I'm sure most of the leaders don't know this important point. Otherwise, what happens is that they lead the society to a chaos, which we already see. Most of the Western countries use condoms and contraceptives, which Srila Prabhupada always criticized. And one must abstain from sex life when it is not required. But by free mixing of men and women, the society has become animalistic. That is why it is said that in the previous years, in the Vedic system, women were not allowed to go out of home. The children, when boys are born, up to a certain age, they were kept at home and then they were sent to Gurukul, where they learn discipline and learn a lot of Vedic culture. And they come back after that, they decide whether they want to become a celibate or a brahmachari or a grihastha. And girl children were never sent to Gurukul, and they were taught at home to remain chaste, and training was given on those purposes. And even after they grow, this practical system was that they had to cover their heads. Many didn't, the women were not allowed to go out at all. And even if they go out, they were asked to cover their head. I'm talking about 20, 30 years, which I've seen practically in my life. Now the systems have changed thanks to those who have promoted sex indulgence in unregulated ways. So they promote women as a source of pleasure, which is true. We all have seen magazines which portray women as a source of pleasure for men. So they put unwanted photographs, men get carried away, men also get carried away. So this is what is happening by free mixing of men and women. People have become more animalistic. And that is why whatever was Vedic system was there, it was very practical. And women were not exploited. Unfortunately, today women also go to work. They wear very unfortunate, very what you call horrible dresses, exposing their body. They don't know that if they continue to do such thing, they may have to take a body of a tree in the next life. Example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam. I will not delve into that pastime. Srila Prabhupada always quoted that when man is alone, he is good. And when a woman is alone, she's also good. But when they are mixing of men and women, then there's a chaos. He also said that men are meant for self-realization, and a woman is meant to create hindrances or obstructions for a man to progress in self-realization. That is what is called Maya. Maya is that which is not true. Another quote by Srila Prabhupada, which he always used to quote in his classes on the subject, were that he said that men are compared to butter and women are compared to fire. So when you bring a butter to the fire, the butter melts. So the point is that man as it is good, woman is good, but when a man is brought closer to a woman, a man gets carried away. And the most important part is sex indulgence. How it happens, we'll discuss when we come to the next sloka. So, Srila Prabhupada actually preached to the Western countries when he went there. Uh, and he preached to hippies who were always indulging in these four sinful activities. They used to always in drugs or drinks. They used to have unlimited sex indulgence. And they used to, of course, they used to feast on meats. They can't live without meat. And at that time, one of his disciples, Hayagriva Prabhu, told Srila Prabhupada that in Western countries, this is how they live. But Srila Prabhupada never uh, compromised on the basic four regulative principles. And they never heard something like fasting. But that's what Srila Prabhupada preached. And for them, sex was like a worshipable process. He worshiped God, they worshipped sex. This was what was prevailing in the early days. Of course, I was not there, but this is what speakers quote. Some of the disciples asked Srila Prabhupada a question that if you are kept in a room with hundreds of women, will you be agitated or not? And Srila Prabhupada said no. That means he had that determination. But Srila Prabhupada was not a populist. Populist means people do adopt measures for them to become popular. That's why I said that at one point of time they say that we must restrict population increase. And today's situation, some states say that they want to increase population. Some states say that the women population is less, so we must have more women like that. And if you see some states where women commit suicides because of dowry reasons. So there are so many controversies today. And Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to understand the seriousness of this and practice accordingly. Even during Srila Prabhupada's time, many so-called uh, people who used to call them as spiritualists, they went around and preached a lot of giving a lot of misinformation. For example, they preached that sex indulgence is a must for one to progress in spiritual life. Even nowadays, we see that there are so many scandals where every day one sannyasi comes up and he indulges in sex life, which are not as per Shastras. He exploits women, and finally one day the scandal gets exposed, and they have a lot of connections, and they come out of all the scandals. But they process them, uh, 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 they promote themselves as spiritualists. One case during those days I remember was there was a leader called Rajneesh. You may all be knowing he had an ashram in Pune where many film stars joined, many popular leaders joined. So that is how many spiritual organizations use leaders in the name of religion, which is wrong. So in order to counteract this, Srila Prabhupada created facilities like having ashrams and all those things in ISKCON. He also said that one should not associate with men, women should not associate with men, and also not associate. Yeah, he has said that men should not associate with women, and also not associate with men who are attached to women. Because if you have a sangha or association of men who are attached to women, you also become a womanizer. After all, association is what determines one's characteristics and qualities. Krishna consciousness is all about restricting the senses. It's not about restricting the senses, but rather utilizing the senses in the service of Krishna. Uh, Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, that he is sex that is meant for uh, procreation. That means you can have sex, but it is meant for creating a progeny which can deliver from the cycle of birth and death. Srila Prabhupada also saw that people were suffering due to indulgence in sex life, and he said that he gave an example how it's sex life indulgence is like an itch. You have an itch, and the more you scratch that itch, the more you want to scratch it. Then there was a lot of issues that many devotees, disciples in those days asked Srila Prabhupada, how can we conquer this lust? Srila Prabhupada said that bhakti can conquer lust. And it's a fact also. There is also a quote in Bhagavad Gita that if lust is not conquered, uh, basically lust, anger, greed, these are three preliminary symptoms of this material world. If lust is not conquered, satisfied, the next thing that happens is one develops anger. And from anger, we know that if anger arises, intelligence is lost and the living entity is bewildered. And if lust is satisfied, then what happens is that greed arises. And when greed arises, one tends to commit sinful activities. So as long as we have lust, we have to be in this material world. And the more the enjoyment we think that we are trying to, the more suffering will be. This is not only for sex life, but also we see that in other areas of senses, other senses also. For example, Srila Prabhupada those days made gulab jamun and gave it to all the newcomers. Now, Srila Prabhupada enticed the newcomers using this gulab jamun. And it was, he used to cook it, and those who, many who came, they came to the moment seeing that, having after tasting the taste of sweetness of gulab jamun. Though they also may have sweets, but they had never tasted gulab jamun. They all got used to it and then they came. But then over a period of time, Srila Prabhupada himself emphasized that you should not eat gulab jamun as much as you want, taking one or two pieces is okay. Because he said that too much of eating sweet is not good for health. So, example, we see if we eat too much of sweets, we develop diabetes. Like that, if you eat too much of salt, you get some other problem. If you eat too much of spicy food, one becomes very passionate. So this is how one should be very, very regulated in whatever the senses they use in. There is a quote which I heard from one of the speakers who said that His Holiness Jai Advaita Maharaj said in one of his classes that if you are a brahmachari and if you are chanting and following the regulative principles, by chance, if you happen to hear the sound of tinkling bells, ankle bells, women wear this, then he said, if you are the brahmachari, you must run away from there. Because we see in Shastra also example of Vishwamitra, who was a great ascetic, who was a great yogi, but he meditated for more than 60,000 years or so. But he was disturbed in his yoga practice when he heard the sound of the of the ankle bells of Menaka. So this is a one for brahmachari should do, because if he's hearing the sound, he must run away from the place. Then he said, if you are a grihastha, then better to look at all the women as your own mother. So if you are looking at all the women that you see as mother, then you will know, you should not be disturbed by sex indulgence. Also, they said that in the Shastras also that women are not to be exploited, women are to be protected. Nowadays, we see that women are exposed in the media, in the society, and they are therefore exploited also. And that is why we see that so many women are enticed into so many unfortunate activities. But as per Shastra, this is, a woman is supposed to be protected by her father as long as she is in the house of her father. Then she is supposed to be protected by her husband when she gets married. And then after 50 years of life, if the husband goes to Vanaprastha, she is supposed to be protected by her son. So this way, this Vedic system was always to give protection by men in all stages of life. Unfortunately, since it is not happening today, the society is in a very bad situation. Another solution he gave was that it's always better to think that we are at any point of time approaching death, because everyone is going to die. And uh, if we have that in our mindset that we are also going to die, and what should we do to prepare? That's what Srimad Bhagavatam begins with. And Bhagavad Gita also teaches Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhavam, that whatever consciousness you are in at the time of death, that is what your next body will be. So Srila Prabhupada always also quotes that if a person has got a man's body, he was a woman in this previous life, and she was always thinking about her husband at the time till at the time of death, and that's how she has got a man's body. And similarly, if somebody has got a woman's body, that means he was a man in his previous life, but he was so much attached to his wife that at the time of death, he was thinking about his wife, which is very, very practically also we see on a day-to-day basis. In fact, people want to die together, man and woman. And my spiritual master, Isolna Jayapatak Maharaj, also said that it's a wrong concept that one should think dying together. Dying together means man thinking of woman and woman thinking of man. So they both in the next life will interchange their bodies. So the point is that to think that we are going to die anytime. One time it is said that when Srila Prabhupada, in his early years, were traveling in his car with his disciples, he saw, the disciples saw a lot of small, I don't know what they are called, ducklings maybe. There was a mother duck, and around it there were a lot of small, small ducks, and they were all making a loud noise, drawing the attention of the mother duck. And Srila Prabhupada said, see how the small ducks are crying for food. Similarly, we have to cry for Krishna. He gave this analogy. So, of course, good. Now, here in this sloka, the body is compared to a great city. And in the first sloka, there is a description of beautiful trees, creepers, lakes, and so forth. So, like that, for sense enjoyment also, one requires uh, an environment which is conducive to sense enjoyment. I'll give some other examples. Uh, the first sloka itself and the purport Srila Prabhupada mentions of the various parts of the body. Sex impulses are one that is mentioned here. And he mentioned that because the body has genitals and when the living entity attains the right age, be a man or a woman, he becomes agitated by sex impulse. And he also mentioned that as long as one is as a child, it is not agitated, but as soon as he grows up, the senses are agitated and there's an impulsion for sex desire. Now, the material body is such that it is given by material nature, and Durga is another name of material nature, which means fort. That means when we indulge in sex activities, we are binding ourselves in this material fort, and it's not very easy to come out of this fort. So this is one of the resultant reactions. Now here, there are parks and gardens. So we see that earlier, after marriage, people, husband and man and wife, used to be at home. They used to celebrate the first night, also honeymoon or whatever it is. This concept of honeymoon started from the Western countries. So when it came to India, the concept of honeymoon started, and the man and woman would go out of their home to celebrate that night. And today's situation is that earlier people they had restrictions, so they used to go to the park and sit and talk and all those things. We'll come to the point of for talking how the sense organs is agitate. But people, because there were restrictions at home, people used to go to the park and all that. Now people are go traveling abroad for countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Mauritius, and so many countries are there to celebrate honeymoon. So this is what is called westernization of the Vedic this thing. So the point is that when one sees the opposite sex, automatically the sex impulse increases. And it is said that it is so strong, the sex impulse, that by seeing, touching, or talking, or even coming in contact with, or even thinking, one is driven to from subtle thoughts to gross activity. So the point is that if a man is in a solitary place, if he is a brahmachari, he should not become agitated by seeing a woman. That is why if he is not agitated, he is supposed to, is considered a brahmachari. But Srila Prabhupada mentioned this practice is almost impossible. So a brahmachari or sannyasi is prohibited to associate with women, especially in a secret place. The Shastras enjoin that one should not even talk to a woman in a secret place, even if she happens to be one's own daughter, sister, or mother. This is a quote from the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's a very strongly mentioned about one should not, even if one is alone with his sister or mother or daughter, one should not uh, talk in a secluded place. Because it is mentioned the purport, the sixth impulse is so strong that even if one is very, very learned, he becomes agitated in such circumstances. Now, this is the reason we see today in today's newspaper, these days in newspapers, men forcing to have sex with their mother or sister and so forth. That is why it is said Vedic system was very, very scientifically designed. It said one should never talk. On a, now, brahmacharya has 8 aspects. This is also mentioned. This is mentioned in the eighth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. One should not think of woman. The moment you think of woman, immediately you are drawn to that activity. One should not speak about sex life because the moment one speaks about sex life, then automatically one is drawn to those activities. Then it says one should not dally with women. That means many times we see when boys and girls they talk to each other, very laughing, cutting jokes and all these things. That is also not right. That is why it says one should not dally with women. Because whenever man and woman starts laughing and joking at each other, that is a first step forward for further activities. Then one should not look lustfully at women. Uh, the only way to look at it is looking at women as mother. Then one should not talk intimately with women, which I mentioned. One should not think of engaging in sexual activities. Then the next is one should not endeavor for sex life and one should not engage in sex life. And a brahmachari is one who does not even think of a woman. And so these are some various aspects in brahmacharya. And also it is mentioned that brahmacharya has nothing to do with just a change of clothes, but it has something to do with the heart. I go to the next sloka in which there is mention about the rasas. There are some important points here. So Srila Prabhupada mentions about waterfall, which represents a kind of liquid humor or rasa. So in the body, Srila Prabhupada mentions that there are many rasas, and I mentioned about how a suitable environment is required for any activity. We see people going to bars. People go to bar and drink, and there people, if you ask them, they play a lot of nonsense music. They have dim lights, and all these environments promote a person to some or other illicit activities. Uh, in the bars, you get non-vegetarian food, you get drinks, you get intoxication, and they gradually promote illicit sex. And most of the bars they employ women to serve liquor, which we see even today. So they encourage illicit activities. Uh, so an environment is created in a bar. Similarly, if we see, uh, I know I was working in a company some 40 years before, and they used to send us to Goa because there was a factory for that company in Goa. And people used to go, even those days, Goa was known for its beaches, and there were many foreigners who used to visit, and they used to walk nude in the beach because that is their culture. And many people who go to Goa, they used to go to these beaches and see, and they used to create lot of ruckus, and there would be regular fights, etc. The point is that Srila Prabhupada mentioned the supreme mellow or the rasa or relationship is called sexual mellow, which is considered as Adi Rasa. And when this rasa comes in contact with the spring air moved by Cupid, it becomes agitated. So the point I'm coming to is the environment for sex activities. So like a bar is created for promoting sex. Similarly, here Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, there are five representations, there are five sense organs we have. I'll briefly touch on that. Here, waterfall is compared to rasa or taste. We'll go to practical examples. These are basically points which drive a person to uh, sex desire. Rupa, it's a form of seeing a woman. I mean, when men get carried away seeing a beautiful woman, and vice versa also. Another is rasa, uh, which is the tongue. Basically, a tongue, if you see these days, marriage means a woman uh, puts food in a husband's mouth, husband puts food in a wife's mouth. Now, that is the first start or a drive for one to be driven to sex impulse. Then the next is ganda. Ganda is smell, where the nostrils are used for smelling the fragrances. And as we see today, exteriors, women used to be wearing flower garlands, flower. They used to tie in their head also. Basically, it is a measure to attract the husband with a pleasant smell, which has been replaced by chemical infused fragrances these days. So basically, if you see every second person, not I would not say every second person, there's hardly anybody excepting devotees who may be using these perfumes. Basically, it is one of the reasons is to attract the other sex. Then I mentioned about Shabda, which is here speaking about sex. Then Sparsha is touching the woman. So all these are five forms which inspire or want to sex activities. And of course, the ears by hearing sweet sounds, etc. Some examples in scriptures, Surpanaka became very, very lusty when she saw Lord Rama. Ravana became very lusty after he saw Sita. So Srila Prabhupada always says that if a tongue is controlled, then all the other sense organs are automatically controlled. Because if one he overeats, then he oversleeps. Oversleeps, and then next is overindulgence in sex activities. But if a tongue is controlled properly, then all the other genitals are controlled. And of course, in the rasas which we discussed uh, for the form, if one sees a beautiful form of the lordships, automatically one loses the taste for seeing the form of women. Similarly, if one tastes Krishna Prasad, one does not have a desire to eat any other food. Similarly, if we smell the flowers which are offered to the Lord or the tulsi leaves which are offered to the Lord, then we lose the interest of other chemicals induced fragrances. Similarly, of course, I mentioned the more we speak about Krishna consciousness, one loses interest about sex. And the more one hears Krishna Katha or Mahamantra, one loses the interest for all material sounds. So I heard this pastime from someone, which I'll just narrate it shortly. It is said that Krishna once dressed himself uh, in a feminine form, and seeing this, many got attracted. And Uddhava once came to see Krishna, and he was wondering who is this beautiful woman in this beautiful form? But then Uddhava was a liberated soul and he was not bewildered. Then he himself thought it must be Krishna only, it cannot be anyone else. And it is said, of course, we have heard the Mohini Murti Leela from Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is said that Shiva was sitting with Parvati and he had a desire to see Shiva. Lord Shiva is a liberated soul. So he did not get carried away by any sexual desire, but he wanted to see the form of the Lord in that feminine form. So the Lord displayed the Mohini Murti form. And Shiva got so bewildered that he left Parvati was sitting next to him. The point is that uh, uh, Lord Shiva is a liberated soul. He doesn't get, but Srila Prabhupada drives us to the point that sex activity is such that it can drive any person mad. Then some important points before I conclude the class. It is said that the semen is a spiritual energy and it is meant to be used for spiritual purposes and not for discharging it. And the years, people used to practice yoga. This was in Satya Yoga, by which they used to raise the semen to the brain, and thereby the brain tissues were nourished. That is why we see even in the materialist, the celibates who have a good and very strong memory, brahmacharis have a lot of good memory because they don't discharge the semen. So it is said that by practice of Bhakti Yoga, one should preserve it as much as possible. In Kali Yuga, Ashtanga Yoga is not possible, but Srila Prabhupada always said that you practice Bhakti Yoga, you will overcome the desire for sex desire. And even for Grihasthas, it is said that by practicing celibacy, of course, Grihastha means not unrestricted sex life. If he's unrestricted, he's a Griha Meti. He's not a Grihastha. So for a devotee, it is said the spiritual energy rises up to the level of the super soul for a Grihastha. Of course, there are some examples. Examples are like Krishna killed Putana. Putana was she came in as a very beautiful woman. Nobody realized that she was a devil, and she came came with the purpose to kill Krishna. So Krishna killed her, but after Krishna killed her, he touched her body. After which there was a fragrance coming out of her dead body. And Srimad Bhagavatam explained that the fragrance came out because Krishna touched her body. All the parts of our body, finally, all the parts of our body are controlled by various demigods. There are 33 crore demigods. Some of them, there is a demigod for every sense organ. And if we utilize the senses, the service of Krishna, it is said that the demigods also become happy. An example is given of Brahma is a progenitor. And when we use the genitals in the service of Krishna and we use for procreation, then Brahma becomes pleased. And similarly, the other demigods also become pleased when we use the senses in the service of Krishna. Before concluding the class, I will give a quote which Srila Prabhupada gives in his many classes, a quote by Yamunacharya. I have not written the quote, but the translation is Yamunacharya quote Srila Prabhupada regularly uses. Since my mind has been engaged in transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought and my lips curl with distaste. That means the moment anyone is engaged in devotional service to Krishna, automatically one loses the taste for sex pleasure. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. Any of you have got any questions or comments, you can ask me.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavad Pranam, Prabhuji. No
Hare
questions.
Krishna.
No questions, Prabhuji. Much, Prabhuji, for the class.
Yes, Prabhu. You have any questions? Any comments?
No questions, Prabhuji, but it was a very nice class and it very knowledgeable, Prabhu. I mean, Even I tried to read the purport and shloka, but I was not able to understand this much deep meaning actually. Prabhupada explained it very clearly and explained it very nicely. Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Ratna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anybody else? If not, I'll take the class as closed. Thank you all very much. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.